When I was 15 years old, I played on the World Junior Ultimate Championships team from the US, and then again when I was 17. Gender equity is not just a fight for women and gender expansive people, right? Racial equality is not just a fight for people of color. This is a fight that requires those with power and privilege. So get to work.
Bold and Brilliant Life with Bianca Peart.
Welcome to the Bold and Brilliant Life, a show that spotlights people in sports who are thriving in every arena. I'm your host, Bianca Peart. Today, we have our guest, Nina Finley, who is a champion on the field and in the field. She represented Team USA in Ultimate Frisbee, and she is a champion of New York Gridlock, the premier Ultimate League. Off the field, she is a disease ecologist pursuing her PhD and has traveled to over 7 countries designing and implementing ecological solutions to human health challenges. Welcome to the show, Nina Finley.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome. Well, congratulations first and foremost. You are a champion. Clap it up of the New York Gridlock, the premier Ultimate League. How did that championship run go for you?
It was an amazing championship run. So this year was my 4th year on the team. Last year was my 3rd year and my 1st year as a captain. I had an amazing co-captain group with my teammates Jenny DeJesus and Gina Cartagena, and it was a brand new sort of way of running Gridlock that year. We really had no idea what was going to come. It was all about the process. So for me, it was just a huge gift at the end that we won it all.
And you won a championship in 2024, the same year the New York Liberty won a championship. I happened to work with the Liberty, so I feel like we're both champions. Last year was our year uplifting women's sports in New York. How important is that to you, just showing that we are dominant and we are champions?
Yeah, congrats to you and the Liberty too. We feel a really good bond with the Liberty. We've done fundraisers with them. We got to take a photo on the court after one of their games last year. I just love that the communities hype each other up. Everyone in New York that supports women's sports and gender expansive sports is a fantastic community, and everyone watches women's sports.
Everyone watches women's sports, and you've been playing Frisbee for quite some time. How did that even start?
This is my 20th year playing Ultimate, which is crazy to say. I started in 6th grade.
Wow.
So I'm very lucky. I grew up in Seattle, Washington. We have a really big youth program. So when I went to middle school, we had our selection of sports in the spring, track or tennis, and all my friends were playing Ultimate. So I just signed up too, and it totally stole my heart. I'd been a soccer player, a basketball player, and I love those sports, but something about the culture of Ultimate was completely different. We're a self-refereed sport, so everything that we do in terms of the rules and violations and upholding the rules is called spirit of the game. We all have to know the rules. We all have to apply them to ourselves and to each other. I think it's just a really lovely model for how we can sort of police ourselves and not need a police force in our sport, and kind of how that can transfer to society at large. And it also just brings a really accepting culture. Even in middle school and high school, the sport didn't have the same sort of cattiness or inter-team competitiveness that I felt in other team sports. The ethos was just, we don't bully each other, we're accepting. It was always a queer-friendly space. It was a place that boys and girls played together, even in middle school. It's a really challenging time for gender equity.
Yes.
And, boys and girls were learning from day one that to succeed on the field, you have to play with equity. You have to trust your teammates. You have to hold your teammates accountable for fair play, for not looking off girls with their throws, for keeping their bodies safe, and all of that. So I think, Ultimate teaches a lot of lessons and makes a really safe space in the sports world.
That is so intriguing. I didn't realize it was self-refereed. So what happens when there's like a challenge to the play? Does that work? Like I'm thinking of a traditional football or even like basketball. There's challenges. How do you navigate those?
It's a big part of the game. Like you need to know the rules really well. And there's not just rules, there's also how you deal with challenges. So for example, if there is contact made between 2 players, let's say one has the disc and the other is on the mark. So they're standing right next to that person, counting to 10, trying to prevent that throw. And they hit the person's hand, or they think they hit that person's hand, and it throws the disc off of its line. The person who threw the disc would call a foul. So they know that rule was violated. They shouldn't be contact before the disc is released, foul. Then the mark has the opportunity to either accept that or contest it. If they accept it, it's going to go back to that initial thrower and go back to stall 0. So basically they get a full redo. And if they contest it, it goes back at half. So they only get half the stall. And it's completely based on this principle that everyone thinks they're doing what's fair and right. If you're intentionally cheating, like if you know you fouled but you still contest, it undermines the whole sport and it doesn't work.
Wow.
So there's no such thing as intentional fouling, intentional flopping.
Yes.
It happens from time to time, but the culture really just discourages it. It's not celebrated, and people don't end up in the sport if that's their mode.
Mm-hmm. You've been playing since 6th grade, and it's changed your life to the point where you even started your own leagues, right? Frisbee teams in Seattle. Can you share more about that?
So I wouldn't take credit for starting it. I was a child, but when I was in 7th grade, a group of my friends who came from all across the city, public schools, private schools, North End, South End, we just were this bubble generation that loved this sport. We got really lucky that there was a coach who came to town, Miranda Knowles. There were some parents, Randy and Elena Lim, who saw this potential and said, we don't want this just to be school versus school. We want to make a community team. And we called that Small Fries for baby salmon because the club men's team in the area is the Seattle Sockeye. And we just had a great run of it. That cohort ended up playing from 7th grade through 12th grade. And they're my lifelong friends. We just ended up being this really passionate bubble with a ton of support. In Seattle, a lot of the best adult players, club and semi-pro, coach youth. It's a huge, huge gift, and it really changes kids' lives.
So it's big out in the Pacific Northwest, specifically Seattle. Wow, that's powerful. And then Team USA happened.
Yeah, so when I was 15 years old, I played on the World Junior Ultimate Championships team from the U.S., and then again when I was 17. So I made the team at 15 and 17, played at 16 and 18. And yeah, it was kind of wild because my second time, almost half the team were people from Seattle. It's a national team.
Yeah.
But the Fries were such a dedicated, passionate group of kids. It was like almost my friend group going and representing the U.S. It was really powerful.
So basically, that's your world in the Frisbee space. But then you do a lot in the science world and studying, ecology and really into the environment. Where did that stem from?
I think that also stemmed from my upbringing in the Pacific Northwest. My family's very passionate about nature, and we had a lot of opportunities to camp and garden as kids. And I've just always been really drawn to ecology. When I was, I think, 5 years old, I was so obsessed with moss, the plant.
Yeah.
that I cut every picture out of the newspaper that had moss, and I pasted it together in my own little book that I called Moss. And yeah, that kind of sums it up. I've just been seeking opportunities to get to know organisms, and then as I learned that they're under threat around the world, to try to protect organisms from extinction, from degradation. The more than human world is so beautiful and so full of solutions to the problems that we're facing. And I just feel like it would be such a loss to not spend my life doing something about that.
And preserving our future, preserving nature. And you even you studied that in college, correct?
Yeah.
And where did you go to college, and what was that experience like for you? Did you play Frisbee as well during that time?
Yeah, so when I went to college, it was my first time leaving home for a long period of time. And I really wanted to bring it all together. I wanted to study animal science and play Frisbee. I started out at Ohio State.
I'm sorry, I went to Penn State. So.
That's okay. I call myself a recovering Buckeye because I transferred.
Okay, see, good. I'm happy to hear that. I'm sorry, but also happy. Go Penn State, but shout out to the Big Ten.
Yeah, so I had really good friends in Ohio, but I would say Ohio State itself was not my friend. It wasn't for me. Yeah. And I went back to the Pacific Northwest, and I went to Whitman College to finish my undergrad. I majored in biology and environmental studies, minored in chemistry. And a big part of college for me, Walla Walla, Washington, is this remote, it's about a 5-hour drive to Seattle, so you're way out there. Yeah. It's arid. There's a lot of sagebrush, ponderosa pine trees, wheat farming, wine farming. It's a very rural place, and I was part of the outdoor program. I got to lead canoeing trips and bird watching trips for my classmates, and at the same time, we had a really strong Frisbee program. We're a tiny school, very much a D3 size school, and about 1,400 students.
Wow.
But we had so many kids from Seattle that really cared. We decided to compete at D1. So we were going up against the biggest schools. We even met Ohio State again after I transferred. And we managed to get second place in the D1 college championships. That was definitely a highlight. And I got to captain that year. So that was a huge highlight of my Frisbee career.
That is incredible. You're a captain in so many fronts. How would you describe your leadership style?
My leadership style is very based on joy, just based on love and joy. I feel strongly that holding my teammates to a standard based on penalties is not sustainable and isn't really why we play this sport. I want it to be almost optional to show up to practice, but an option that every single person chooses because it's the best time of their week.
I'm learning so much about just how there's a lot of autonomy and community that's centered around that. And that's kind of seems to be like a constant in your life. And especially when you do travel, because when you travel, you're also playing Frisbee and meeting teams and all that fun, community building. Can you speak about Bali?
So after college, I did this program called a Watson Fellowship. It was an amazing opportunity. I was able to craft my own project, whatever I wanted to do, title it, submit it. That was the application. And then I was awarded a year of funding to go and pursue that. It could be anything. A lot of people do art, languages, sports, and I focused on One Health, the human impact of wildlife disease. So I wanted to meet not just the organisms you can see with your eyes, like mosses and fish and birds, but the microorganisms, the ones you can't see with your eyes.
Yeah.
So you have to see them with your other senses. You have to smell them or feel them or taste them or look at their effect on the ecosystem to know that they're there and to know if they're healthy or not. One of the biggest ways I wanted to explore this was through corals, coral reefs.
Ooh.
Corals are a really monstrous organism. They're a chimera of multiple species in one body. Fun fact, so are we.
Oh, true, right?
So we're all corals, we're all lichens, but corals make this really visible. It's an animal made of jelly over a white sort of bone structure with these photosynthetic algae embedded in the flesh to help them produce sugar. So that's a coral. Unfortunately, they're bleaching. So because of the ocean temperatures rising, we're actually expected to lose all coral reefs in yours and my lifetime. And I wanted to just be there and see if I could do anything about that while there's still time. So I got to work with some community fishing co-ops in Bali and actually look at what's causing the bleaching and how can fishermen, these indigenous people who are so close to the coral and very entwined with it, depend on it for their lives, what can they do to support coral reefs and how can I support them as a scientist? But I also wanted to play Frisbee. So while I was in Bali, I also got to play with UB7, this really fun, energetic team of local players who bring together across cultures, across genders, play mixed Frisbee. And I had some American friends who were in Australia for Worlds at that time that I was in Bali. And we needed a few pickup players, and we managed to get some of the top U.S. national players to come out and play with the Balinese team. It's the first time that Bali had won a Southeast Asian regional tournament, and a lot of people got to meet their heroes. And my friends from the U.S. also got to learn about international Frisbee in Bali, so it was a really good time.
That sounds incredible. What is the international Frisbee community like compared? Like, what was your experience? Because it wasn't just Bali, other places as well. Can you share a little bit on that?
Everywhere I've ever traveled, I try to find Frisbee. Whether it's Arizona or Ecuador or Dublin, there's often a community of people. They're so welcoming. Wherever I go, people are thrilled to have a visitor join their pickup scene. Somehow the culture of inclusion, equity, and care is like consistent throughout this global sport community. And I think being self-refereed and being a bit of an alternative sport really helps. Also the fact that it's so often mixed gender, so you really need gender equity for the sport to work. Everywhere I've been, it's just a group that's full of so much like hope and passion.
What is a misconception of the work that you do in the science and health space?
Oh, that's a good question. So I use science and health in an anti-colonial way. So what I do in my day job with Health and Harmony, a nonprofit, is try to protect rainforests by investing in the indigenous peoples and local communities who live in those forests and steward them. A really common misconception in this work is that I'm the expert, is that I'm the one bringing the answers and teaching the local communities what to do. But it's the exact opposite. We use a method called radical listening, and all of the solutions that we invest in, all of the wisdom and knowledge and expertise that we draw on is the communities. They have lived in these ecosystems for millennia, for more generations than I can even fathom. Like, their connection to this land is deep. And when we develop this radical listening methodology, it's very simple. When we're invited into a community, we will listen. We'll just ask the question, what would you all need to be able to thrive, be healthy, and protect this forest? Period. And then we listen for hours.
Yes.
And whatever comes up from that community as a whole is brilliant. And then we just invest global resources and funds in making that happen. And then as the research manager, my job is to collect data on that. And it's been wildly successful. Where we work in Indonesian Borneo, there's been a 90% decrease in people reliant on logging and a 70% decrease in deforestation over the first 10 years of work. Communities knew what they needed.
Yeah.
They needed healthcare in that case so that they didn't have to log to pay emergency medical bills. I would never have come up with that. I don't know a single scientist in the global north who would have come up with that. But the communities knew, and all we had to do was listen. They were right.
You're an extension of the indigenous voices.
I'm just trying to amplify what they know so well.
That is really, really, so important, so important. And what is like the most profound, I know that you experience a lot and learn a lot and have contributed so much. What is something that's like closest to your heart as a product of your work?
For me, what really makes my heart happy is spending time in ecosystems. And I've been very lucky to do that. I always say if there were no problems in the world, if there was no climate change, if there was no injustice, I would just study moss.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit more about moss. When I hear moss, I think of like dirt and microbiomes and, but there's a lot of power, a lot of depth to it. What is it about moss that is just so captivating for you?
Honestly, the color green. I'm not a moss biologist.
Yeah.
I would love to be. I ended up deciding that I need to be something really useful to the world. And disease ecology is that combination of my awe at the micro, at the mosses, at the bacteria, and also applying it with people, because we're really at the center of what's going on with our biome right now. But look, moss is so beautiful. Like, if you get a chance to go out on a walk, especially in the winter when it's cold and gray and it just feels dead, moss is thriving at that time of year.
Yes.
That's when it is putting out its spores into the world and reproducing. That's when it's glowing and green. It really likes moisture. It can withstand freezing temperatures. Just go and have a moment, smell it, touch it. It's always so refreshing for me in the winter to go on a neighborhood walk and just look at the diversity of moss. Like, some of them have little star-shaped leaves. Some of them have like wildly scaly sort of morphologies. Some of them will have spores growing out of them. It's the little things. If it slows us down if we can take a beat and pay attention.
Because you're literally connecting with nature. Like, it keeps us grounded. With your work in PhD, what are you pursuing in your PhD? Because that is not an easy feat. And I did see a quote. You mentioned that in your industry or in your world, it's not really, I guess, suggested to go on and pursue a PhD unless you have to. So what made you have to and want to?
So for me, I was waiting for the right opportunity for a PhD. It's a big commitment. For me, it's going to be 3.5 years of focused study on one subject. And I feel like it's a huge gift because the opportunity to get to focus on something beautiful and interesting for that long is just, in our sped up world, like, that's such a gift. And I wanted to make it really useful because I feel this sense of responsibility. Like, if I take 3.5 years away from, activism, I want it to mean something. I don't want it to be purely for my own career. So I was waiting for an opportunity. I didn't want something that would just get published in a paper and produce sort of academic outputs. I really wanted something that would benefit communities and forests and ecosystems. And I didn't know if that would happen, but I got very lucky in this project. So I've been working with communities in Menumbu, Madagascar since 2019, so over 5 years, through Health and Harmony. And this is a community in southeastern Madagascar. There are fragmented rainforests. There is rainfall, but not as much as there used to be. And there's a lot of hunger and a lack of access to healthcare. These are driving communities to cut the forest to produce charcoal, to produce food, to build their homes. And this forest is the last remaining habitat for several species of lemur, frog, and bird that live nowhere else on Earth. So this is a really critical and urgent place. And as we always do, we started just by asking the communities, what would you need to be able to protect this forest? Because roping off a forest and ignoring the people who live there, that's called fortress conservation. That's been done for years in a colonial way. It doesn't work, it's not just, and it's not sustainable. The forest suffers and the people suffer. So we needed to do the opposite. We needed to make sure both were thriving. The first thing that communities designed was food security through rice farming and healthcare through direct access to a doctor and a nurse. So that's what we did first. But a few years later, we came back and we said, now what? And they were ready to move to the next stage with both. So they wanted to grow protein, not just rice, by farming fish and ducks in their flooded rice paddies.
Oh, wow.
So doing a polyculture, kind of making an ecosystem out of their farmland. They said if we can farm protein where we already farm, we don't need to cut the forest to make more cropland or grazing land. And that's brilliant. They also realized that it was time to start preventing infectious disease, not just treating it. And we were able to work together to realize their two biggest concerns for infectious disease are malaria, which is carried by mosquitoes, and schistosomiasis, which is carried by snails. Both mosquito larvae and snails live in rice paddies in the water. And fish and ducks eat both. It's one of these really remarkable community-designed opportunities to treat multiple ailments at once with community expertise. So for my PhD, I'm researching that. Can growing fish and ducks in the rice paddies not only provide improved food security and nutrition, but can it also be a way to control malaria and schistosomiasis? These are the two most prominent infectious parasitic diseases in the world. They affect 240 and 250 million people, respectively. So if we can address that in a way that doesn't require chemicals and medicines which develop resistance, which have an expense associated, or in combination with those, it would save millions of lives.
Preventative care. That is literally what stuck out to me. It's so critical to work on preventative care. How are you able to use that approach? Because traditionally it's like, okay, how do we like cure it versus prevent? So how are you even able to position your research into preventative care? And is that like hard to do?
Yeah, the way that I frame healthcare is called planetary health. And I try to frame forests as medicine, and healthy wetlands as medicine, and healthy people with enough food to eat and access to economic security as medicine, right? These are things that prevent disease before it starts, or that can make disease manageable. You know, we're always going to get sick. We're always going to have viruses, bacteria, and parasites in our world. They share this earth with us. But if we're in balance and we're healthy enough to sort of almost welcome them in and out of our bodies without getting too sick, that's preventative care. A lot of my work in the academic space is trying to reframe public health to recognize the importance of ecosystems, because when we go more than a couple hundred years back in Europe, or look at the knowledge in the rest of the world, this is obvious. I've never worked with a rainforest community who didn't already know that rainforests are medicine. It's actually only been lost by like the handful with the most power in the global north. So it's really about re-educating that group, of which I'm a part, rather than educating the rest of the world.
Yeah, which is powerful because that's where the funding and the support, and that's where it kind of comes from. You know, this is a lot of work and long hours, radical listening. That's like you're using that same methodology in this as well. What's something that keeps you balanced and sane throughout this?
I'm making a big assumption that I'm sane.
Right. It's hard because it's so hard because you're on the grounds. You're with the people who are literally being directly impacted and know what it takes. And it's hard for their voices to be heard, especially in the indigenous. So like, I imagine for me, I would just be so frustrated on their behalf. And like at some points losing hope. And you mentioned with Frisbee, instilling hope, that community, like how do you keep that hope going and keep pushing?
It's essential. You know, I think for me, a lot of I get frustrated. I get angry. I get exhausted. Like, this is all very real. But what keeps renewing me, a couple of things. I think one of them is basic awe at life, moss, but also microorganisms and fish and people. There's never a moment that I'm walking through a forest, whether that's in New York or in Madagascar, that I don't just feel overcome by awe that I'm a conscious being alive right now with the capacity to absorb the beauty in everything that has evolved and that coexists. That is always going to be a source for me of energy. And then Frisbee is a huge part of it. It's kind of crazy that I've kept up this sport for 20 years. It comes at a big cost. Most ultimate that we play is not funded like semi-pro is. So Gridlock, we have a big fundraising support, we have community support, and the ownership of the team is supportive. So we're actually able to get paid a small stipend for playing the Gridlock games. But most of the Frisbee world is self-paid. We play club and community level. So there's just a huge investment of time and money that we put in. But it's for the people. I can go run around on a field every few days of my life with people who are just as committed as I am to this game that we all buy into. We just drove 6 hours straight to a tournament in Virginia, played through incredibly high heat for 2 days, drove back Sunday night to make it to work on Monday morning. And the whole team did that with joy. It's just, I always say this to teams in huddles, just remember to be grateful. Like, how many people in the world really have a community that's as bought in to the same goal as they are? It's collective action in such a cohesive way.
It is collective action in a cohesive way. Though you guys are putting in work. And, we were saying earlier, everyone watches women's sports. For some reason, I don't know where everyone has been, but now they're tuned in, and we are incredible athletes. Equality, equal pay, equal opportunity. Can you speak to where you can see opportunities to pour more into the Frisbee landscape?
Yeah, I think the PUL, the Premier Ultimate League, as well as the WL on the West Coast, are really good opportunities to try to start building that equity in ultimate. So my perspective on professional ultimate kind of takes the long view. I mean, this is a young sport. It was only founded in the 1960s near here in New Jersey, and then it spread like wildfire. I looked around, at the most recent tournament I was at hundreds of people playing this high-level sport with sponsored jerseys, with expensive cleats, and I just wondered, what would the first people who threw a plate or a Frisbee in the 60s think now with this really impressive international sports community? I think we have an opportunity in ultimate to really build equity from the beginning. We're not dealing with hundreds of years of inequality and catching up like other sports. We actually started, in the era of feminism. But unfortunately, we still live in a world with a lot of inequality and patriarchy, especially in sports. And, that has come out in more recent years. In the last decade, ultimate moved into the professional space, the semi-pro space. And there were a couple of men's leagues that came around. Why were they men's leagues? Why did only men's professional leagues get funded and started? We had the opportunity to start on the same foot.
Yes.
And unfortunately, people with power took that opportunity and threw it away and decided that they were going to start putting men on a higher pedestal than women when they started the professional ultimate community. Some people have really recognized that and boycotted that and spoken out. And other people have gone with the flow because we're so conditioned that that's normal and okay.
Yeah.
I don't think it's okay, and even to this day, we have now women's and gender expansive leagues, like the Premier Ultimate League. They are not funded to nearly the same extent as the men's leagues, not even an order of magnitude. And, the women and gender expansive athletes are barely paid. And we do our own fundraising. It is completely unequal. And I think there's been some discussion, misguided discussion, saying now it's equal. See, we have both. You got to look under the hood. Are these actually equal? Not yet. And we all have a responsibility as fans, as players, to not be satisfied, until there's actual equality in this sport.
Yes, because you're a champion. You're a champion in the PUL. And obviously, being a champion is incredible. But with that, Did you feel like a champion?
Yes and no. I think within the PUL, yes. My team earned that.
Yes.
And I was so proud. You know, Gridlock had been through a lot of turmoil in the previous season. We had lost the majority of our returners, and we had completely restructured the leadership. So like I said, like we were not expecting outcomes. We were trying to focus on a process. And we had a team that was very young, that had a lot of players who had never been at that elite level. We had players that it was their first time getting filmed, which is a huge benefit because they get to watch their film back and improve based on the feedback of that. So I was so proud that we didn't just rely on people's experience, but we actually built something from the ground up. And a lot of the players that played Gridlock last year have really exploded in their ultimate careers now, and used that as a stepping stone. So that felt like a huge W. That was a win. But when you take a step back, like we are in a bigger world than just the PUL. And the PUL is not on equal footing, say, with the UFA, with the Ultimate Frisbee Association, the men's semi-pro league. And it's not just up to us on the PUL to claw and climb that mountain. There are people with power that need to be part of that process. Gender equity is not just a fight for women and gender expansive people, right? Racial equality is not just a fight for people of color. This is a fight that requires those with power and privilege. So get to work.
Yeah, speak to it. I love that you're raising that awareness and, informing it. And what's important is just because there are two leagues, men's and a women's version, does not mean it's equal. Looking under the hood. I love that. And, this season, as defending champs, didn't quite win. But I imagine there were a lot of wins that came out of that season. What was something that really stood out to you this past season as a defending champ? And still a champion, in my opinion. Once a champion, always a champion.
Thank you. One thing that indicated to me that was still a successful season was how the team held ourselves after that loss. We had gone to the Midwest and we were playing in that semifinal game with big dreams. And when we lost that game, I think we were down. People were not pleased, but I didn't see anyone take that out on their teammates, and I didn't see anyone really take it out on themselves. This is a sport that requires a lot of resilience, and you're going to lose. If a team loses and then starts to blame one another or lose sight of the fact that we were really lucky to be there at all, that really gets me down. And that didn't happen. Everybody rallied. We had a great night of bonding that night. We came out and watched the finals. And when we had our end of season party the next week, people were full of love and joy. I didn't hear anyone sort of trying to rehash or blame or, explain away why that had happened. It was a good season. And the team that ends a season that way is really strong. And I know we're going to come back really strong next year.
Yes, and being a captain, again, congratulations on continuing to be a leader, because it's not easy, and it's hard to lead when there are losses. It's very hard. So what did you see from yourself? What did you learn as a captain, as a leader during the season that really was okay, wow, okay?
Leading Gridlock is very much a team effort, and a lot of it is about trusting my co-captains and the coaches that have different leadership styles from me for taking responsibility for what they're going to do and thriving with it and running with it and just being there to support and celebrate them and then knowing they'll do the same for me. And I have to give a ton of credit to my co-captain, Jenny DeJesus. It is her team, and she has done so much labor, emotional labor, logistical labor, making this team happen. Our coach, BT, travels up from Virginia and just brings such an air of calm and expertise to this team. Gina Cartagena, my co-captain, travels from Colombia for this team and spends months of her life away from her home, spending time in New York and New Jersey to give us her on-field leadership and all that she brings. So it's just really about putting my co-leaders on a platform and letting them shine.
That is dedication. Like you said, you've been dedicated since sixth grade, not only on the field with Frisbee, but even in your work in science. How do you see those skills transferring on the field and in the field with your research work?
One of the things that I've learned the most from Ultimate is how to perform under pressure. the more elite that I get in this sport, the more high pressure moments I find myself in. And there is nothing quite as scary as standing on that end zone line, waiting for the pole to come down, knowing that I'm going to go catch that pole and throw that first pass when it is 12-12, game to 13 in an elimination bracket. Like, there is something that makes you just want to go take a nap and quit. That would be so much nicer. But I couldn't do that to my team. We're all out there together. And that's what we play for those high pressure moments where we get to put ourselves to the test. Was all of those days of sprinting and working out in practice, was it enough? And there is so much mental toughness that goes into this sport. It's not just your physical preparedness. Like, you need to be able to remain calm and confident under tremendous pressure. And I think Ultimate's taught me a lot of ways to deal with pressure. You know, I have a mental toughness mantra that I go through before every point. I breathe in and picture and feel all of the anxieties, whatever is on my mind. Am I a little bit injured? Did I drop a pull in the last point? Am I frustrated about something outside of Frisbee? I let it all flood in at once, and then I look at a tree. I always pick one tree on the horizon, and I breathe it all into that tree with a lot of gratitude for that tree for holding all my stresses, and then it's gone. And I'm just a Frisbee player in the present moment with nothing else. And I can play that point in that present state of mind. And I know that after the game, I'll go and retrieve those stresses and I'll go back to the real world, but I can trust the environment to hold that for me in the moment. It's really helpful. So that's one way I think that, like, yeah, the nature around me supports me to play Ultimate, but then when I have, let's say, a big presentation to give at a conference or a really stressful situation in the field where we have to move quickly to avoid a thunderstorm or something like that, that mental toughness comes in handy.
I love that. I love that. Everything is so interconnected. It really is, if you really think about it. I love the concept of look at the tree in your eyesight, relinquishing that to the tree, hug the tree virtually from a distance, and, continue and be present. It's all about being present. And yes, it's all about being present. Where do you get your motivation from? Like, who motivates you? What motivates you?
I think the same motivation in Frisbee applies to my work in planetary health. That feeling of interconnection and interbeing is really strong. There's this philosophy that was forwarded by a monk named Thich Nhat Hanh. It's called interbeing, and it goes beyond saying that we're all connected, which we are, but it actually goes beyond that to say we're all one, which might be kind of a trippy thing to think about, but I really believe that at a fundamental, material level. From a biological point of view, my body, your body, is actually an equal number of non-human cells as human cells. The bacteria in our gut help us digest. The little eyelash mites in our eyelashes, they keep us clean. We are ecosystems unto ourselves, and the water that I drink here will eventually go into a cloud and rain on a forest somewhere else. That is physical material. That is not just a metaphor. That interbeing really lifts me up. In a weird way, even though we lost the semifinal game, we also won it because there's no way that Ultimate could exist without opponents. And I'm really grateful for everyone that makes this sort of community possible. Like, even if someone's our adversary, whether that's a parasite in the water or a team that we have to beat, they're making our lives possible by being themselves and living their lives.
That is beautiful. I love that. And you, again, Nina, you're incredible. We're going to wrap things up with a rapid fire. So you ready?
Ready.
What's one thing you have to travel with?
Hard copy books.
Really? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm breaking the rapid fire rules. Because why? I mean, hard copy, yes, over electronics all day for sure. But why?
It keeps me from getting lonely. Travel's really lonely. I spend, days at a time by myself and months at a time in places where I don't speak the language with my colleagues very well and I don't know anyone very well. So at the end of the day, I want to be able to come home to a friend, and a book with a story inside really feels like company.
I love that. All right. Best Frisbee city you've played in?
Ooh, I have to say Seattle.
Well, home is where the heart is, and that's kind of where the capital is of Frisbee. I get it. I mean, you already answered this, but favorite organism to geek out about?
At the moment,
yes.
Biomphalaria snails Look them up. But lifelong passion for moss.
Yes. Favorite Frisbee move?
Ooh. It's boring, but I love to be the reset, that safe person that can always be open hands so we never get stalled out and distribute it to the other side of the field, just making big shapes.
Okay. Most beautiful ecosystem you've ever been in?
Oh, gosh. Look, there are so many beautiful ecosystems, but the one that really fuels me is in the Pacific Northwest, the Hoh Rainforest on the Olympic Peninsula, the Hall of Mosses Trail, the Salish Sea, the Pacific Coast, the sea stars. It is a place where I can just feel how deep and old the history in the land is.
It's like you were meant to be born in Seattle, in that region. I love it. It's aligned. It was already ordained that you were supposed to be there. Go-to hype song before a game?
Ooh, anything by Snow the Product.
Yes. Last, rainforest or reef?
Look, they're all one.
I love that. I'll let you pass with that. I'll let you pass with that answer. Lastly, bold or brilliant?
Ooh, I have to say bold. Yeah, I think it's harder to be bold than brilliant.
Say more.
Courage takes a lot. Courage means taking a risk and being wrong. We don't need more experts right now. We need people who can listen and have the courage to be humble.
Love it. Well, anything you want to say? I know you shared so much of your story around Frisbee, around science, how they're interconnected, how it's all one. What's some words you would like to share with our community and advice for living a bold and brilliant life?
I think that one lesson that I've learned through sports and life is to try to be more in touch with my emotions, with my gut, and trust it and listen to it. It's not a strength of mine. It hasn't always been, but I'm working on it. And I think that's something that I would just try to give everyone permission to do. You know, if you're feeling like something's not right, or if you're not understanding something, don't look away. You deserve to understand what's right for you, and that's where your power is going to come from, on the field or off. So keep investigating, have the courage to do that, follow your gut, and you're enough.
You're enough. Well, you heard it here first. Nina Finley, thank you so much for sharing your story. Everyone, I hope you learned something. If you did not, I don't know where you were. But please drop a comment on what you've learned or what you enjoyed most about this conversation. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, because this story is so powerful and we deserve to share Nina's voice. So thank you for being a part of the Bold and Brilliant Life.
Thank you so much.
Yes. See you next time.